Welcome back, everybody, to the Movement Podcast. I'm here with my best friend.
That's right.
Brooklyn Amaral. So I feel like it's a depressing topic, what we're going to talk about.
Doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. And it depends when you're listening to this. We are recording this on August 6th. And the purpose of today's podcast is talking about back to school.
It can be exciting. I think some people are looking forward to maybe not going back to school, but for kids going back to school.
Yeah, like parents for their kids to go back to school.
Yeah.
Do you think most parents are like, I cannot wait for my kids to go back to school?
Yeah, I do.
It's not a thing where they're like, oh, darn, freedom again.
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. I think you can feel a bit of both.
Do you remember, like, when you were younger, going back to school, what did you always look forward to?
School shopping, like getting my pencils organized and my markers and my kit. Did you ever have a kit? Maybe not.
That was the hard plastic one?
Yes.
That was see-through
and my
on top?
Notebooks. Yep. I was like, loved being organized.
Even, I think they still have them, but 5-star binders.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Do you remember with the zipper, with the zippers?
I just got so nostalgic like that. I just loved that feeling.
Yeah.
I get excited for my girls to eventually get that stuff because that is so fun.
I remember how excited I was. I think it was
5-star binders.
I think it was grade 7 or grade 8 when like you actually needed a binder. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to get a 5-star binder.
So fun.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and then you get the whiteout markers.
Yeah.
And you would like write on the 5-star binder. Do you remember this?
Yes, I do. It was like yesterday for me, pretty much.
Yeah. Like,
wasn't that long ago.
Actually. I always loved going back to school shopping, like going to Staples.
Yes.
And getting pens and pencils. Even though a Bic pen can last you 78 years, it's like, no. I always need a package of 1,000 every single year.
Yeah, so fun. Highlighters. Oh, yeah. All the things.
It was good. So what I wanted to talk about today, I pulled you aside last week being like, hey, we should probably record a back to school podcast, is just some tips and tricks. And just like if you find that this time of year is difficult for some of your clients. So I guess my first question, because that was saying I was going to ask you a question, I didn't actually really ask you a question. Do you find the back to school season to be difficult for some of your clients, or is it like a welcome surprise where they're looking forward to it because it allows them to get back into a routine?
I think every season has its difficulties because it's transition. So whether that be something that you're excited for or something you're not, you still have to change some things.
Yeah.
And then I also think that different seasons, not necessarily like weather seasons, but like summer, back to school, they just require different practices and a different game plan. So, and I actually think I talked about this in one of my stories last week. So what I would say, do you want me to go into what I would do? Okay. Is I would look at what you want to accomplish, what you want to change, what you want to add in. It's one thing to have that set out, and I think people do, but then there's a big like missing link I think a lot of people forget about. So it's like, okay, like I'm going to start going back to the gym more consistently, or like I'm really going to dial in my nutrition or whatever. And then they kind of set it as that. They have this great intention. But if you do not have the action plans in place to get those going, like they just normally do not happen, because next thing you know, it's September 4th, kids are back to school, and then it's the 12th, and you're like, oh shit, like I haven't even done it yet. So write out what you want to accomplish, what's going to change, what's going to look different for you, what are you trying to incorporate again, and how are you going to make that possible? It doesn't need to be a 10-step system, but it needs to be like, what are you going to do? What path of least resistance is going to help you accomplish those things? So I think that's the first step, is figuring out what's going to change. And then, oh, you want to drink more water? Great. You can't just say it. You need to have a plan to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you recommend to people to almost write out what their days will look like as well? Like here or now, I know most people are working and their kids are in camps or daycare or something like that. But when they're going back to school, it's like, okay, this is the time that I can wake up. This is the time my kids are going to be at school. This is the time I'm working. This is the time I'm going to work out. This is the time I'm going to plan my meals. Like, do you recommend people to do that sort of thing as well? Yeah,
I think that, well, first of all, wake time and sleep times tend to be off during the summer because schedules are different. Yeah. Like, I was saying to you, like, our girls don't have to be, up and getting dressed at 7:30 to go to school, but they will be come September. So I think having, and obviously I'm a big routine person, but like having that morning wake time be consistent. If come September when your kids are going back to school. So like having times planned out, yeah, absolutely. Setting things in your schedule, getting back into consistency with sleep is probably going to be one of the biggest things. And then, maybe you're not planning every day, but I talk a lot about just looking at your week ahead, even day ahead. Look at your busy day. You might have 2 days that you're, running around and you got kids sports or whatnot, but like planning ahead a week in advance, looking for those busy days and planning that food prep day, planning that grocery shop. Don't wing it. I always say most people can't wing it and win, or it's stressful. Like one of my clients, she's a paramedic, does all of these things. And she's doing my 12-week program now. And beforehand, like, was kind of like eating on the fly, like trying to wing it, but like not. Mm-hmm. And then the other day she was like, I have been so on top of it. She's like, I worked all weekend, had everything planned. And she's like, somehow I feel like I have more time throughout the week. And I'm like, yeah, it's like maybe more time and energy in the moment, but it saves stress and time and energy like throughout your week. You almost feel like you have more freedom. And I think you do, but you also have more mental freedom because you don't have that stuff, that weight on your shoulder or the thing in your head that you have to do. So yes, setting out a time to get those things done, I think is really important.
What was the thing you said? Wing it? Wing it? There's 2 W's.
You can't wing it and win.
Wing it and win.
That's
a good one.
Like, yeah, with your nutrition especially, but everything, like goals in general.
Oh, 100%.
Winging it.
And I think that's like a common misconception. Maybe it's just me, but like, I think that's for everybody, even for someone like ourselves.
I say that all the time to my clients. I also don't wing it and win. If I don't have my protein planned, I'm not getting in 140 grams. Like Absolutely. I have to have it planned.
Absolutely. Or even just workouts. Like, hey, this is the time that I'm going to work out this week. Like if I have to wing it.
And same with the actual workout. Like if I didn't have, sure, I do programming a lot. Like I can spit out a workout. But if I got to the gym and didn't know what the hell I was doing, it would probably be shitty. It wouldn't be as good as it needs to be. I wouldn't work as hard. Like, again, I couldn't wing it as well as when it's like planned and laid out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Coaches need coaches.
Yeah.
I think that is a common misconception is like, oh yeah, Brooke has been in the game forever. She can just whatever. Like it all just comes second nature. And it's like, no. We still have to work.
Yeah. And I was also talking about something the other day with people, but like if you, I think I said something along the lines, like if you think that like planning and prepping and your nutrition is eventually going to be a thing that you don't have to think about, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You'll forever, like to be fit, to be healthy, to have your shit together, it is constant planning and thinking. So, you can't be like, oh, I can't wait for like in 2 months when I don't have to think about this anymore. Well, then you're not thinking about being strong, healthy, and fit forever, So like you've also been doing this for so long. You still have to prep and plan. It's still nutrition's probably on your mind every day. It's something that just has to be there. You need to be okay with it. It's a lifestyle.
Okay, so I have a question then. Not really related to what we were going to be talking about, but it's ringing in my head. So when we talk about prepping and planning and nutrition, I know where my head is going immediately, and I think a lot of people is like, all right, well, I have to track my macros then for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Like, is that what you think or no?
No, I don't. I will say that I think that there's a time and place for that. And I think it's a very important tool that if you are looking to dial in and be your best is absolutely something that you should do, not off the bat. Definitely. I think there's gradual steps that we need to get there. Like in my 12-week program, we're not hitting that until week 8-ish because there's more important things that are foundational. That's like an accessory tool that's very empowering, and there's a lot that goes to it that I think is very helpful, but you can't just track and be great forever. Like, and you should be able to not track and still have your shit together.
Absolutely.
So you need to focus on those other things way ahead. So no, when I'm saying prepping and planning, I don't mean like figuring out your macro numbers. I'm talking about like, and not even necessarily having your food prepped, but planned, written out. Do you have it in the fridge? Is it, are your veggies cut up? What, again, the path of least resistance, right? Like, do you have this stuff in the house? Because if you don't, you're not going to eat it.
Yeah.
So no, I don't mean like macro details.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What are some other best practices that you share with your clients when it comes to back to school?
I want to say be realistic because I think, I know there's people that are excited to jump back into routine. It's like when people start something, it's like, I'm going to work out 5 days a week and I'm going to do this every day. And I think the intention is great. And I'm going to say this is something that you should be realistic in. I'm not someone who's always on board, like set a very realistic goal. Like when we're talking about achieving, because then that always means kind of easy. We won't go there, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in terms of like your schedule and your output, you do need to be realistic. I think you should be realistic and have like a bonus, you know, like, okay, you want to work out 5 times. Is it going to be realistic? Would 3 be very achievable and 4 or 5 be like icing on the cake? So I think it's about be realistic. And then this all comes down to the planning part, right? Like have it planned. Look ahead. Which days can you actually do it? So be realistic about, you know, what you can achieve, and set a minimum, set like a bare minimum, whether that be with steps, with food prep, with workout, like have non-negotiables. Don't just have a concrete plan, because if you don't achieve it, then you will feel like you failed. And then also, so when I say like, you know, have non-negotiables, it's like, okay, I'm going to work out on Monday. You wake up on Monday and you feel horrible. Like you can't follow through on what you had planned. So what are your non-negotiables then? You're not just going to lay in bed all day. You're going to still drink your water, and you're going to just get up and move for 10 minutes. So like having non-negotiables, almost like a backup plan for the hard days.
I like that. What are some of your non-negotiables?
Do they like in regards to like my day?
Yeah.
Skincare is a non-negotiable for me, but it's so much more than about my skin. It just makes me feel good. Like that's always the start to my day. I think some sort of movement, and it doesn't need to be crazy. Like, you know, maybe it's, if one day I was feeling horrible, it would be like doing some like yard work or like playing it with the kids. You know, I think just sedentary nothing feels good about that to me. And something along lines with my nutrition, you know, so. Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I was just, as soon as you said, I'm like, I wonder
what are my non-negotiables?
What Brooklyn's are. Anything with sleep?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Lots of sleep for sure. Sleep
great. Love the sleep.
Yeah.
The sleep.
No, Luke and I have really dialed that in like the past month. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you really, really feel a difference. It's so underrated, but super important. Yeah. Sleep should be non-negotiable, especially if you're not feeling good. And I don't mean sleeping all day.
Yeah.
But you know,
it's funny when like, because once again, not related to what we're talking about, but kind of, I've been very inconsistent with our podcast, and the feedback that I get on our podcast is actually very good. Like people enjoy it, which is great. Thank you. But I think sometimes the reason that I'm not as consistent with it is I feel like we talk about the same things all the time, but unfortunately, that's kind of what takes to get healthy as well, is like just doing the boring work. So when we talk about sleep, like we talk about sleep all the time, right? When we talk about counting your macros and using it as a tool, not necessarily for the rest of your life, we talk about that all the time. But I think it's that people need to be reminded a lot more than they need to be taught.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. People need reminders more than they need new information. So if we talked about this in our last podcast 3 months ago, someone might listen and be like, oh yeah, shit, I really should do that. You know? So like, yeah.
It's true. So we're going to talk about the same thing.
Yeah. And I listen to similar podcasts with like different people that talk about the same thing, but maybe they threw in something different and you hear it differently the second time. We don't just hear something once and do it.
It's like self-help books. Like at the end of the day, 99% of them are pretty much all the same. But like sometimes the way someone writes it, it just clicks with people differently. But what I was going to say with sleep, and once again, I've talked about this 1,000 times, but it is like, I don't want to say it's the most underrated form of recovery, because I think people now know, but like it is the most important recovery tool. When we talk about massage and physio and chiro and stretching and mobility and all these bits and food, like those are all important, but like sleep is one of the most proven ways to actually recover your muscles, to actually help you build more muscle. It's going to make you feel better. Like it is a free tool that we can all utilize, and I don't think the majority of people put enough focus on it. I know for myself, I can definitely focus on it more, because it just seems like it's so easy. And like everyone always says, everyone loves sleep. Like, oh my God, I had the best sleep, right? But like, do we actually put enough time and effort into really preparing our bodies to sleep as best as it could?
Yeah. And you have to like, you can't just say I'm going to sleep more. Like what's going to cue you to go to bed earlier?
That's right.
Like Luke has an alarm that goes off on his phone at 9:45. I'm like, oh, here's the fucking alarm again. All right, let's pack it up.
Yeah.
Gotta go in.
I'm not even surprised.
Literally, that is the cue.
Yeah.
Had that alarm not go off, I would have very easily kept working or watching the show. Like that is the cue to go, whether we feel like it or not. And we go up and we go to bed. And Luke is just on a life high right now with the amount of sleep he's getting. He's just like
high.
flying, like just cruising. But it is really important, and you do feel so much better. And speaking of sleep and like tired and whatnot, another non-negotiable, I did say movement, but like working out is truly a non-negotiable.
For sure.
Even on tired days. And I've heard this in more than one place that I think people need to hear, because especially moms, you know, we wake up tired, kids are up, whatever, too tired to work out. Working out can actually negate the downfalls that you have from not getting enough sleep. It's actually going to turn it into a positive. You're going to have more energy. You're going to feel better. It's going to do stuff on the inside that's going to be more beneficial than if you rested because you were tired. And this is where it's like, control your output. You know, if your intention the night before was to go hard and you woke up tired and you're like, oh, fuck, I can't work out today. No, you can just turn back the intensity. It's going to be more beneficial than you resting because you're tired. And, you know, take it with a grain of salt, because everyone's going to be different on this. Like, listen to yourself or not. But sometimes we need to push through because we know what is better for us.
Yeah. Even I was just talking about this in the last podcast I recorded with Courtney. When I was traveling, like I was obviously jet lagged, but I still like went out for a run, and the intensity obviously wasn't as high as it would be if I was at home. But just go out and go through the motion, and I felt so much better. Like it's almost like it just wiped the jet lag away.
For sure. And that's when it's a habit. Your habit, you don't decide if it's a habit, if it's the right day to do it or not. You do it. You know how to push and pull. You know when to be able to dial it back, because the habit of movement is going to be powerful, and you're going to get something from it no matter what. Yeah. So I think that, it's definitely non-negotiable. I don't even have conversations in my head about if I'm working out or not.
It just happens.
It just does.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's funny. I didn't really have this realization until you and I were talking a little bit about it upstairs, which is I find there's like two like Super Bowls in the fitness world. One is back to school. Well, one is New Year's. And then the other one is actually back to school. And I think it's because it's just like an anchor point in people's year where they're like, all right, kids are going back to school. That's a great time to like start on this journey. Or, you know, summertime is kind of the equivalent of like November, December, where we're in this like fairyland of there's all these vacations that are happening and like tons of family outings, and which is great. I love it all. It makes me super happy. But I think it's also a time where people fall off, and then they need that date that's like, this will be the date that brings me back. Yeah. And that happens to be January 1st or September 1st, whatever, after the long weekend. Do you find that with a lot of your clients? And do you try to like maybe be like, hey, let's not wait for a date, but like start now?
Yeah, I'm going to say that with my clients, and especially the ones that I work with during the summer, we're not changing much going into the fall. And I'm going to call everyone out who feels like they need this huge reset come fall. You probably do this every year. If you are like, oh, I can't wait to like get back into it, you probably need to change something in May or June so that you're not feeling like that every August. Yeah. You know, so one thing I work on, and you know, happens like going, you know, December is a big month for like people are just off their game. These things happen every year. If you are just going to work out and take care of yourself in 9 to 10 months out of the year, like it just really shouldn't be that way. Again, this is where people really need to work that all or nothing mindset. You know, instead of going into December, like this is just a write-off because there's so much going on this month, or like the summer is just going to be too crazy. I could go down a rabbit hole here of all this stuff. But what I'm getting at is that like this stuff happens every year. You need to learn how to manage and control your health and wellness. And that doesn't mean it can't look different, but I don't think it should be neglected that you feel like you just gained 30 pounds over the summer and you're crawling out of a hole in September. You need to figure out a way to have your shit together, to put it nicely, through the summer season. Yep. This is where you need to adjust your expectations. And when I said different seasons require different things, you need to know what that is. Not just shutting off in the summer because there's more social things. It's light out till 9, you know, whatever. Like, this is what I work with on my clients. Oh, you have a barbecue, you have a wedding, you're going on vacation. Great. We're not going to put coaching on hold. Yeah. Because your priorities should not change dependent on your environment or the weather. Figure it out. Mm-hmm. So, sure, it can look different, but I think the people that I'm working with now, we're not gearing up for this massive overhaul in September. We're just schedule change for sure. And yes, some things, but we're just rolling with it. Why are you laughing?
No, because I'm just thinking like we'll go back and address some things. I feel like I'm making you out to seem like you're so hardcore with some of your clients too. Like
I'm really nice.
Everyone is 100% all the time. Where it's like the reason I'm snickering is that's the exact opposite of how you are.
Yeah,
like,
if I'm coming off like a cruel, strict coach, I'm not that way.
Definitely not. Definitely not. That's why it's like, if anything, one thing I wanted to ask you about as well is I think something that I sometimes struggle with is when people, and once again, this is another thing that we talk about all the time, but when people first start with you, it's a slow build.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone's listening to this, hearing you and I talk right now, people might think like, oh yeah, I start working with Isaac and Brooke and like, I'm counting my macros. I'm working out 17 days per week. Like it's like all or nothing, where it's like, no. You start and it's like, all right, don't worry about like how much you're eating. Just try to stick to these foods. Like it's very, very slow build.
Like we say, the boring stuff is the most important stuff. Just like the not sexy things in the workouts are going to do great things for you.
Yes.
So
when someone starts with you,
mm-hmm.
How do you kind of have that conversation with them? Because I wouldn't be surprised if people think it's going to be a lot more hardcore when they start compared to what it actually is. So what does that kind of conversation look like?
So there's a whole like initial kind of like onboarding, and it's all about talking and discussing and being open and finding out what, like I work with a lot of women, and although they have similar goals, everyone's lifestyle is different. Everyone's busy in a different way. And, you know, I work with people who have been working out and that's not new to them and they can go hardcore. And I work with people who have never done it before, people who have tracked macros, people who don't even know what a macro is. So I'm really about just meeting the person where they're at. Sometimes I start with people and, you know, they're working out 3 times a week. Others, they're just walking. They're making the commitment to give to them for 30 minutes a day. Accomplish that, be consistent with that, and then we'll add something in. So from a physical perspective and nutrition, it's going to be gradual and it's not going to be overwhelming, and you need to be successful with step number 1 before we go into. I have to tell a lot of people, like, just slow your roll. We will eventually get to the pretty things like tracking your macros and like hitting the targets, but like anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Like hit this number, prep your food. You can do that. What the hard things are is the mindfulness, and it sounds silly and, you know, cliche, but like stuff that you have to control and that you can't punch in a calculator and like figure out. That's the hard stuff. So like eating slow, like being in the moment, and then just learning. There's a lot of education in the program with like little videos with the content. So yeah, I meet people where they're at and we build from there. And people are at a very different place at the end of the 12 weeks, but not everyone starts at the same place. I mean, in terms of nutrition, it's gradual and we'll get more specific, but even with the physical, I think some people come in and they're like, oh, or they'll be like, am I going to have to work out like 5 days a week? I'm like, no, that's not where we start.
No.
If that's not for you.
It's funny how I think as coaches, one of the most important things we have to do, especially the first month, 2 months, 3 months that we're working with people, is holding them back.
Yeah.
Because most people like, and I especially think back to school, New Year's, they're like, all right, it's a fresh start. Let's go. I'm only going to eat veggies and protein. I'm going to work out 7 days a week. And to your point, you said this when we first started, like they're setting these unrealistic expectations. Whereas a coach, we're kind of like, hey, how about you work out 2 times a week at first? And it's like this slow building block. And we're giving them permission to be like, you can actually slow down to speed up in the long run. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing, is learning how to slow down and pull back and being able to push ahead, opposed to just having this one speed that you think you can maintain, that you can't.
Definitely.
And another thing with the workouts is a lot of people that I work with, majority of them are remote. So, you know, we're starting with what they have as well. Like, not everyone, I think sometimes people think that their workouts are going to look like mine or what I share on Instagram. I very rarely have clients that are doing the same thing as me, because they're just not in the same place right away at the beginning. So, you know, you're not jumping into like having to do chin-ups in week 1 and working with a barbell. Like some women I've worked with have like 2 dumbbells for 12 weeks and we progress there. So yeah, it's really about where you're at, and it's all progressive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think just like with running, it's really opened my eyes to how a lot of other things work in the health and fitness space. And the reason that I really like it is no matter who you are, like when we talk about seasons, you start off low volume and you build your volume throughout the weeks, throughout this 12 or 18 week process. And I think it's just really cool to see it like, all right, so I'm only running 10 kilometer days, and then I go to 12 and then 13. And it's like this slow, gradual build. And it makes sense in a fitness standpoint. But then when I think about it with nutrition, I'm like, well, of course nutrition would work the same way. We don't need to go to counting macros right away. It's like, no. Well, let's first just actually focus on what are you doing? Like take a food log of what you're currently eating. Okay, now let's just try to introduce some small things, like maybe just pick from this list. And then, all right, now here's how many of these foods to have from each of those lists. So I think it's oftentimes really, it's easier for people to see from a fitness standpoint how it can be progressive. But I think when it comes to nutrition, people have this all or nothing mentality.
Yeah. And I think if you have ever done a running program before, and I can speak to this myself, like when you say slow down, do not run over 150,
Yeah.
like you have to control yourself or else
Yeah.
you're going to be like, I feel good. I'm fine. I can run with my heart rate at 155,
For sure.
you know, and still maintain the pace. That's not what it is about. To build the volume, you have to run slower
Yeah.
to be able to run longer.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you go through it. You're like, oh, okay, my coach was right. And same with the nutrition. Like people who want to speed ahead at the end, they're like, okay, I get it. I know why we started slow and gradual. So it really does go hand in hand. This is where people are like in the workout space too. Always love the go. They need to be sweaty and like they just fucking did the hardest workout of their life. Or it's almost like they don't appreciate the slower ones. We're always wanting to like go faster, go harder, like slow down. Slowing down can be better. If you're doing a strength workout, you're taking 90 seconds. You don't have to be doing something, get your heart rate up between every single set. There's a purpose for the rest.
Yeah.
Just like there's a purpose to starting slow. And I think people have a hard time with that. You know, they just want to like be busting ass every single time.
Yeah.
Whether that be workouts or nutrition or running.
Yeah.
People have a hard time slowing down.
For sure. So when we think of back to school and you, what are some of the things that you're going to be incorporating this back to school season? Anything different, or is it kind of like,
Mostly it's just like from a schedule perspective, to be honest. I try to be consistent. I mean, I'm not perfect. Okay. I still have my hard days and I have, you know, tougher seasons, but I always do, you know, have different times when I want to dial in on different things. But for the most part, I think it's just like my schedule will change in terms of when I'm training. But from a nutrition and training perspective right now, we'll stay the same.
Yeah. Even like mindset, all that stuff, habits, they're pretty much all consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like consistency in my life.
Yeah. And I think when we think of the different seasons, and you kind of already touched upon this, but the whole goal is like, if someone does want to dial it in more during back to school or January 1st, that's okay. But it's like, as long as our base has been good.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing with training, right? Like we can't always be peak weeking. We can't be lifting as heavy as we possibly can every single day of every single week. It's like we need to build up to that. And I think the same thing will happen from a nutrition standpoint where, you know, people shouldn't be doing 1,100 calories every single day or 1,200 calories or 1,300 calories. So it's like you need to build up to those things gradually.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to have like peak seasons of like, I'm really dialed in.
For sure.
Because I'm training for this thing, or I have this wedding coming up, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I think it's okay to dial it in.
Yeah.
But people don't need to live in that dialed in state 100% of the time.
No, and I think that's important, but the most important is that healthy base and that maintenance level.
Yeah.
If you find yourself like in a hole dialing in, then something needs to change.
Yeah.
But like you need to have a healthy base, which is also maintenance. I think something that's really hard for people is, you know, so you have this dial in phase, you get to where you want to be. Then what? People have a very hard time switching that mindset because they're not fighting and going for something anymore. And they don't know how to just have that healthy medium. It just plummets.
Yeah.
And then they're like, they've lost everything. So it's about having that healthy space that you feel like I could maintain this all year round, but then also have seasons of dialing in, which I think is great, you know, because I think it's important to still challenge yourself to have goals to be able to dial in, but it shouldn't be so polar opposite. It's like your maintenance phase, you're good, your consistency, and then you're dialing in, and then you're back down to maintenance.
Yeah. I find like mentally, I tell myself rather than like a maintenance phase, I call it like a recovery phase because I know, all right, when like right now I'm in training season, but in October when I'm done, it's like, all right, I'm going to go in like a 2 or 3 month recovery season where I'm still going to be running, I'm still going to be eating my foods, but like I'm not going to be super focused on having X amount of carbs and X amount of protein. I'll still eat like a healthy base, but like that's like my recovery. Like I'm allowing my body time to recover because the stress I've been putting on it over the past few months, you know, it's a lot.
Yeah. And the key thing is you having a plan for that recovery
that's
season.
Right.
You're not winging it.
No.
Like we said before, right? It's like you have a plan and it looks different, but you know what you're doing. You're not just going to be like, oh, well, we'll just kind of, you know, because that can be a slippery slope for a lot of people.
Definitely. I think that's actually one of the big pitfalls is people will work with us and they'll reach their goal. And then rather than working with us through a recovery or maintenance phase, they're like, well, no, I've reached my goal. I'm good. And then that's sometimes if they haven't really spent the time to build those healthy habits where like maybe they fall off track and lose some of those results.
I work with a lot of my clients for 24 weeks. Like my initial program is 12.
Yeah.
And it's not that everyone needs to feel equipped to fly away and do it on their own. Like that's always the end goal, is that you don't need me forever. Like I'm teaching you tools and habits and empowerment that you feel like you know, can handle it on your own. But not everyone gets to, you know, where they want to be and stay at week 12. Some people want to keep going, and there's nothing wrong with wanting extra accountability, but then just getting to that phase where you're like, okay, I'm good here. We're not pushing for more weight loss.
Yeah.
Goals change. And then let's just practice staying there with taking pressure off of yourself, relaxing, so to speak, because that stuff needs practice.
Yeah.
You know, you might work so hard for 3 months, like in the big picture, that is a blip.
Yeah.
Like you need to practice through holidays, through different seasons, and that takes time.
Yeah. It's cool. I have something else, not really related to this, but is there any other final thoughts, questions, concerns on back to school stuff that you wanted to let people know?
No, I don't think so. I think that that changes can be good, and just to like get yourself in the right mindset, have accountability to your actions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, like whether that be with a spouse or a grandparent or friend. Like maybe if it's help with the kids or help organizing. Sometimes you can't do it all on your own, and you need assistance. So I think it's important to. And if that's not in your household, it's like find a supportive community. Like movement, you know, plug that in there.
There you go.
But seriously, you need to surround yourself with people that are supportive, and community helps. And I know we're so big on that here. So yeah.
Set realistic expectations. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Have an action plan for the goal. Like you can't just say it. Have the steps planned out. It can be 2 or 3. And one other thing I always say is go to bed proud. You know, like look at the beginning of the day. What would make me feel really good on the end of the day? What do I need to do today to feel successful? And then if you can go to bed being like, I did what I need to do and I'm happy you did it. Of course, there's going to be days when you're like, that was shit. And my rule is don't let it happen 2 days in a row. Just fix it the next day.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. The reason I wanted to this be separate is because if it's a total gong show, then I'll just cut it out completely.
I'm excited.
So just out of curiosity, if we think the past 5 years might be too long, but we'll go with 5 years. What is the biggest thing that you've learned around, we're going to talk nutrition, fitness, and like habits and lifestyle, but like what have you changed your mind on when it comes to nutrition over the past 5 years, we'll say? Okay.
Because there is something pivotal. So I'd say like maybe 3 years ago, I decided I was really going to dial in. And I'd say I'd been consistent and had periods maybe dialing with my training, but not so much my nutrition. I just kind of had my thing. I hadn't touched tracking in years since I like had to compete. And that was like 10 years ago now. And that was just like, looking back, not a healthy thing. Like it just, you know, anyways, we won't go down there. But like 3 years ago, I decided that I was going to start tracking again, and it was going to be, I just wanted to dial in. I wanted to be like, if I really fine-tuned everything that I was doing, what would I be like? What would I feel like? How would I perform? And I did it, and it was just like the best thing ever. And I'm like still, I'd say like 85 to 90% tracking the way that I did. And it's just reinforced the powerful tool that can be in having it be a very healthy space. I think there's a lot of negative things around tracking sometimes, like you're an obsessive person. I also think that you can have a healthy obsession with like being your best and feeling good. And I think that's okay to have. So I think that I learned the power that you can gain back from really looking at your nutrition from a tracking perspective and having goals and being accountable to that daily. Because if you don't, you really are just kind of like, I don't know, you just don't get the details. So that was pivotal for me because I brought tracking back in and realized how powerful this is, how healthy it can be, and how I can help other women use a very powerful tool without thinking like they're some obsessed crazy person with their food.
So whereas 5 years ago, you were maybe a little bit more reluctant on
I was just
tracking, or especially with clients.
Yeah, I'd have clients that did it, but I was just like, I don't know. I was just resistant to it.
Sure.
Maybe it was from stuff in the past, like, when I was doing the competing, but I was just like, I don't really want to go there.
Okay.
But then I was like, just got into the mindset of like, that was the area where I felt like if I needed to be and feel my best, that's where I had to do it.
It's a good one.
And it was amazing.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Mine would be carbs. Not that I've
Carbs.
ever thought they were the devil. Like I've always had my rice. I've always had my bread. I've never been afraid of it. But I think from like a nutrient timing performance standpoint, just really utilizing carbs and understanding how they can fuel intra workout as well, like especially with longer workouts.
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that. Or running, like actually understanding, the majority of people who bonk during a race just probably aren't fueling properly. So I would say the importance of carbohydrates and then just like electrolytes as well. That's another big thing, probably within the past 2 years.
Yeah.
That has really changed.
Well, it's because you're a professional runner now. So like,
Oh yeah,
sponsored athlete.
Yeah, no biggie.
And I think like you going through that on your own makes it, you can really speak to it with conviction.
Yeah.
As a coach, when you do that hard work on your own, like this is where I think when we are telling our clients, running clients, personal trainers, whatever it might be, like we're not just saying it. We've done it and we know it and we can preach it and be, very like passionate about it because we know it works.
Yeah. What about like mindset, habits, anything big over the past, 2 to 3 years that has sort of changed in your mind? I have one if you want to think.
Okay, go.
So, and this is where it's like, maybe not, it's more of a tool, but like the scale.
Good one.
Yeah, I think before, no, I've never had issues with the scale. Like I'm lucky in that sense. But I think I did always utilize it or see it as a tool of like, all right, am I losing weight? Am I gaining weight? What does this mean? Whereas now I use it as a tool to let me know more from a performance standpoint what's going on. So like there's times of the year, AKA right now, that I weigh myself every single day. And it's not because I'm obsessed about losing weight or gaining weight. It's because I want to make sure that I'm not losing weight and that I am staying at this weight so I can perform as best as I can.
Yeah.
Whereas if I know, okay, I'm weighing myself and all of a sudden I'm starting to lose weight every single week, week over week, then it's like I need to make sure I'm eating more food because I know that this is eventually going to hinder my performance down the road. So I think changing the whole idea of like using the scale to, focus more on a performance standpoint or tell us kind of like what our body is doing. Whereas before, if people didn't want to use the scale, or I wouldn't really push it. Whereas now I'm like a lot more convinced of like, hey, even if you don't have a good relationship with the scale, maybe we can just change your thought process on how we can utilize it.
Yeah, I love that because I think also a lot of times people will think that you use a scale a lot if you're trying to lose weight. You're not trying to lose weight. You're fit, you're healthy, it's performance based. And even like Luke and I, right now we're doing a weigh-in every day. Neither of us are trying to lose weight. And what I try and teach my clients too is you're trying to like disconnect any emotion from the scale and using it as a check-in point.
Yes.
Not even just you're not stepping on, am I skinnier, am I fatter, because if you're a girl, it fluctuates all the time. Yeah. But using it as a check-in for yourself. Like it's like 30 seconds, you're on there for like however long, but maybe the whole thing is like you step on it, you get off. It's like, okay, am I focused on me today? What am I doing for me? So using it as a powerful check-in for yourself and not a judgment tool all the time. So yeah, I like that because I think that, the scale can be like tracking a great tool. It doesn't mean some crazy obsessive person, right? I think there's a time and place and good reasons for using them.
Did you see I did a post this weekend? So I went out for a run Saturday morning. So it wasn't even like it was super hot. So there's something called a sweat rate test that I'll do during like this training season now that I'm getting ready for a race, where I'll weigh myself before like a long run or a hard run, and then you weigh yourself immediately afterwards, and you take into consideration any liquids or carbs that you've consumed. So during the period of that run, it was just over a 2-hour run, so 2 hours and 5 minutes. Weather was not overly hot. It was humid, but not overly hot. I lost 7 pounds in 2 hours. So this is where it's like, you know, if you're thinking of it as a weight loss standpoint, someone's like, oh my God, Isaac lost 7 pounds in 2 hours. It's like, no. Mm-hmm. It was clearly all water, right? It was all sweat. The reason that I'm doing that is so then I know, I put it into a calculation, and okay, so if I'm losing roughly 7 pounds of water in 2 hours, I need to be consuming about a liter of water every single hour when the weather is like that, and I'm using those sorts of efforts, right? So it's like, that's once again how like the scale can kind of be fake in a sense. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, I lost 7 pounds in whatever, 2 hours. Like that would be people's goal for weeks or months, right? So it's like, it can be fake in a sense.
I remember I did that test. Luke was doing it at one point.
Yeah.
And then when I was running a lot, he was like, you should do it. And I think I lost 4 pounds on a run. But again, like this is where I think that using the scale is important to like understand the patterns of it too. Because if I eat or you eat late at night, not even to have like completely like over-consumed, you're going to step on the scale. Like I might weigh 3 pounds more. And I'm not like, oh, I gained 3 pounds overnight. Like, no, physically, you did not consume over 9,000 calories. You know, you have to consume 3,500 calories to actually gain a pound, right? So like it's kind of like the ebb and flow of your body. So you can learn a lot, but you're not going to you didn't lose, 7 pounds of fat.
It's all back
on that run.
It's all back.
Came back real quick.
Yeah. I was almost going to do another post being like, hey, I gained 7 pounds in 2 hours. Just because like all the liquids I consumed afterwards. But do you have one that's coming to mind for mindset or habit?
I'd say with fitness, this might not have been over the last 3 years. I'd say maybe like 5 to 10 years. Is I'm really just focused in on myself with my training. Like I think, 10, 12, even more years that when we were at hybrid and like, into CrossFit, it was all about like lifting heavier and like looking at the numbers on the board and what do you have to do. I am so in my own lane right now with my training. Like I am looking at my own numbers. I'm not, me and my dad will have friendly little competitions, but like in terms of what I'm lifting, I've gotten so much more in tune with my body and how I'm feeling that I know when I can push. And if I know that I can't, I'm just like, if this is hard for me in terms of like comparing my numbers. So let's say like I'm pushing one weight and it's easy one week and next week it's hard for me. It feels hard. I'm not like, oh, I'm weaker. This sucks. It's a shitty workout. If I'm having to lift like 5 pounds less on an arm than I did last week for a press, but that is hard for me in the moment, I'm totally okay with it. Mm-hmm. So I'm just really good at like, I have healthy pressure on myself, but I'm really good with knowing the ebbs and flow of training and energy and output, and that changes. And I just go. I don't let really any of that get to me mentally. Whereas like 12 years ago, if I didn't perform the way I wanted to or hit the numbers I thought, I'd be like, ugh.
Do you do you have any I don't know what the word is, like updates or thoughts on different training styles over the years? Like, have you had a change of heart in, what really does make an effective training plan?
Following a plan. Just like everyone should follow a plan.
Yeah. Have you always done that though? Like, has your training really changed in the past 3 to 5 years?
Not in the last 3 to 5 years. I'm, the blocks that I do are either 8 to 12 weeks. And they're all progressive. I think it's just, I don't think my style has really changed so much. Actually, maybe like 5 years ago, I was training 3 times a week and I train 5 now.
Yeah.
And like, that's my thing. I like that.
Yeah. Mine, when it comes to fitness, is I think before, and this is just because I was doing more CrossFit, and there's nothing wrong with CrossFit, by the way. It could be an amazing tool, but in their whole tagline, it's constantly varied. And I think I've always subscribed to that belief for like, oh no, it has to be constantly varied. Muscle confusion, right? Tony Horton, P90X. Whereas if you want to see gains in specific areas, you almost just need to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I really learned from Will, where it's like, it might not be the most exciting program, but like, yeah, it's not a bad thing to repeat the exact same 5 days for 2 or 3 weeks, because that is how you get better at those things, is by doing those things more.
Mm-hmm. And some might think it's boring, but it actually is exciting when you can go back and build.
100%.
If you're doing different things every day, all week, what are you comparing to?
Yeah.
Where are you building?
Yep.
You don't have anything measured. And this is where tracking is so important.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pressing that exercise history button every time. Today I did press. What did I do last week? What were my reps? Where can I increase?
Yeah.
It's exciting when you can see the gains. You can't see progressions when you're changing things all of the time.
Yeah.
So yes, it might be boring because you're doing the same exercise bi-weekly or weekly, but like, it's planned for a reason. And it's exciting at the end when you're like at peak week and you've progressed and you can see the numbers and the data for it.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big one for
Yeah.
me. Any other thoughts or big sort of changes in your beliefs when it comes to health and fitness over the past 3 to 5 years?
I'm sure there is. I
Yeah,
don't know if I
nothing's
can think
coming to
of
mind.
that off the top of my head.
Yeah. I thought that was a good question, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. It made me think
Yeah, good.
about like different phases. And,
Good. Well,
yeah.
keep you thinking.
Yeah,
I won't
think
take
it
this
was.
out then. I'll keep it in.
Yeah, no,
There-
I think it was good.
There we go.
Yeah, I had to reflect.
Cool. So I said I wanted to try to keep this short. We're at 46 minutes.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's short.
That's short.
For us.
We can do a lot longer. Yeah, we'll end it here.
Let's do it. No. Okay. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. Appreciate it.
So much fun as always.
We'll have to have you back on here soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.